My name is Alex Baden. I'm a software engineer at Salesforce. What I'm going to talk about today is my and my team's journey in migrating from Aura to LWC, and how making the switch from Aura to LWC made developing on the platform easier. So it allowed us to write less code that was more modern, and it was generally a lot more helpful in just kind of allowing us to get unstuck when we were stuck. Just a show of hands, how many people have written an Aura component in the audience? All right, basically everybody. How many people have written and when I say Aura component, I mean Lightning component, right? How many people have written a Lightning web component? All right, so a few. So I think this will be very relevant to this audience. First things first, make sure that you're basing your purchasing decisions on products and services that are currently available in the platform. All right, so I work on a team called the Gus team. We build out the software development lifecycle tools, or the Agile tools, for the developers and PMs and everyone inside of Salesforce. We build on top of the Force.com platform. So I am a developer on Force.com just like all of you. So I don't have access to any special backdoor APIs inside of Salesforce. We just build on Force.com. So any issues that anybody's ever had with Aura or Apex, I've probably had the exact same issues. We release the product that we build as Agile Accelerator, which is a managed package on the App Exchange. You can download it and set it up in your org completely free if you want to. Some of the LWC stuff I'll be talking about today is not included in Agile Accelerator yet, but we will be adding it. Let's get started. So first of all, let's talk about how LWC allows us to write less code. So to discuss this, I'm going to go through a quick example of a very, very small feature. So we have this tasks component. When the user double clicks inside of a column, we add a task into the UI. We don't save that task to the server yet because the user could click away and maybe they don't actually want to save that task yet. So if the user does click away from the task, then we just want to remove that task from the UI. So it's never been saved to the server, we're just removing it from the UI. So to do this, we have there are a few kind of moving pieces to this. So we have a tasks component, which is the component that's kind of at the outer layer. We have each individual task component. So the tasks component is comprised of these columns and then individual tasks. And then what we're going to do is we kind of go through this create, fire, handle life cycle to perform this. So when the user is focused inside of a task and they click outside of the task, that is going to fire a blur event. So in HTML, when you click outside, it's creating a blur. When that blur occurs, the task component is going to fire an event that the tasks component is going to listen for. When the tasks component handles that event, it's going to remove the task from the UI. So this is how this is working. And now you see the task is removed from the UI. All right, so now I'm going to go through all the code that is required to do this functionality in Aura, and then I'm going to go through the exact same functionality in LWC. So let's start with how we would do this in Aura today. The first thing we have to do is we have to create a .evt file, or create an event. So we create the event, we give it a type, we have to decide is it a component application event, we give it some attributes, and then we also have the meta XML file, which we also might check into our version control. Then we have the task component. So on the task, if we want to, so we kind of went through this create, fire, handle flow. So we already created the event, now we have to fire it. So at the top of the task component, we register the event that we're going to fire, and then inside of a text area, we have an onBlur handler, which when it receives the blur event, it invokes this method in our task controller, and if called handle subject blur. Then we check, is the task new? And this is pseudocode. Is the task new, and does it have no subject? If so, we're going to have our helper fire this delete unsaved task event. So we have to get the event, and then we have to fire it. Once the task component fires the event, the tasks component has to handle it. To handle it, we have to add a handler at the top, give it a name, event, action. When it hears that event, it invokes the action method. Here it's called handle delete unsaved task. In handle delete unsaved task, we're just going to get all of our tasks. We're going to find any task. We're going to find any task that does not have an ID. Since the fact that it doesn't have an ID means that we know it was a new task. It was never saved to the server. And then we'll just have our helper set our tasks equal to the value of those updated tasks. So this is all of the code that was required to do that relatively simple thing in Aura. Now let's look at the same exact functionality in LWC. So this is all of it. So when we go through the create, fire, handle flow, so we create the event down inside of the handle subject blur with the new custom event, and we're going to call it delete unsaved task. So what's really nice is that this custom event, it's part of the standard web API. So this custom event constructor. So we create it by calling new custom event. Then in the HTML file on blur, we invoke the handle subject blur method, check if it's new and has no subject. If so, we dispatch the event. Inside of ADM tasks, we're declaratively handling the delete unsaved task event by adding an on delete unsaved task attribute to the task component. If it hears that, it's going to call handle delete unsaved task, which will just filter out any tasks that have no ID again. So, all right. All right. So you can see side by side now between Aura and LWC. This is, I made the font exactly the same size to just kind of express the difference. But you can see it's a huge difference. There's a lot less cognitive load. It's a lot easier to reason about. Much, much simpler. Another thing that's nice about about working with LWC. All right, so we can see there's a lot less code. Right before we had 8 files, we had to check in the event file, the event XML file. We had a helper, a controller. Sometimes we might need a render. In this case, we didn't. But it's half the files, 70% less code to do the exact same thing. I'm going to drive from over here. Okay. Another nice thing about working with LWC is that Lightning Data Service is included as a first-class citizen. So whereas before we would have to create this Apex method where we're deleting the task, now we can just hook into the UI record API, where we just import the delete record method, and then we're able to use it in our Lightning Web Component. So this is not that much code or that complicated, but there's just a lot that's going on behind the scenes, right? So it's less context switching. We don't have to get out of our client-side JavaScript world and go back into Apex. We don't leave the file. We don't have to create the Apex class, the metadata. We don't have to check all that in. All the wire adapters included in the Lightning UI APIs, they respect object CRUD rules, field level security, and sharing. So in this case, I'm just deleting a record, but there's also a get record method. If I was using that, I wouldn't have to worry about all the security. It's being done for me with Lightning Data Service. All right, so another thing that we really liked is that we're now able to access all the new modern features of JavaScript. So there are just kind of some little simple examples. This is, so with LWC, we have access to features up to ES9, or ES 2018, almost everything. There are a few caveats. So in this case, we just want to get the completed task IDs. So what we're going to do is we're going to filter out all the tasks to get anything that has a status of completed first. Then we're going to map over those results and return just the IDs of the tasks. So you can see how verbose this is in ES5 and previously, where we have to include the function keyword, the return keyword. Now with LWC, we have access to the fat arrow functions, which is basically just another, it's another way of writing a function with slight differences in scoping. But for this example, it's exactly the same. We filter out anything with a completed status, and then we map over all the IDs. So another thing that is nice is that we're going from a very proprietary system or framework to just being able to deal with standards. So in Aura, we had this .cmp file, right? What is a .cmp file? Nobody knows unless you're an Aura developer, right? Unless you've read the Aura documentation. Your IDE doesn't know what a .cmp file is. Your computer doesn't know what a .cmp file is. With LWC, we're just writing markup in HTML, right? Any developer can come in, they understand it, it's very clear. With Aura, we had to have this Aura ID if we wanted to uniquely identify something. So in this case, what we're doing is we're trying to, in JavaScript, just get the DOM element of this text area, that's all. So in Aura, we would have to give it an Aura ID. With LWC, we can just use data attributes if we want. There are different ways to do this. This is how I like to do it. But I'll just give it a data-ID attribute, which is just part of native HTML. Then if I want to actually get that DOM element, I'm going to need to do it in either the controller or the helper, or maybe the renderer. There are all these, these files, they have their own distinct names, and they need to be called controller.js. Now we just have a JS file where we do all of our JavaScript. And then lastly, if we want to actually get the DOM element, we need to do component.find, pass in the Aura ID, and then .getElement. So again, all proprietary APIs that we need to hook into, we need to learn. Now we can just do this .template, which references the template that the JavaScript is referring to, and then we'll just use query selector and get our text subject. All right, and then the last thing that we really found was that it was a lot easier to kind of get unstuck when we were writing in LWC for a few reasons. So for one thing, the IDE was a lot more helpful. So if you install the Salesforce extension pack, which is excellent inside of Visual Studio Code, it's going to give you this Intelsense feature where if you're using some of the baked-in APIs like Lightning UI Record API, for example, and you're importing some of the methods, you highlight over the method, and it's going to give you all of the all the arguments with their types. It's going to give you a description. It's going to give you a link out to the documentation if you do want to leave. But again, as I was saying before, it makes it a lot easier to have less context switching. You don't need to leave your IDE. You're just working inside of there, which is really nice. So on top of getting help from the IDE, it's also, so when I'm kind of in Aura land and I need to get help from somebody, it's a little anxiety inducing, right? So I have to, first of all, we work in a very complex large app, right? So we have to extract the issue down to like its smallest form, probably create some components to do that. Then I'm probably going to go to Stack Exchange to get some help. So I need to copy paste all my code into Stack Exchange, make sure it's perfect. I'll probably write a comment above the code for which files it's in, because it might be like 6 or 7 different files, like in our example before. And then the person that is trying to help me, they need to go in and they need to copy paste from each individual file, make sure everything's perfect, create components in their org, paste them into there, maybe deploy that or just save it, and then finally run the code. And if they need to make any changes, Then they have to update the files. So there's a lot of friction from the moment when I have a problem to the time that I get help. And there are a lot of places where like the ball kind of gets dropped. And when it's harder to do something, we're less likely to do it, right? So when it's harder to get help, we're less likely to ask for it. We're more likely to maybe come around with hacks or alternate solutions. And we're less likely to post things out there on Stack Exchange or other places where then other people can come in behind us who have the same problem that we did and find the answers. So what's really nice, and this is not part of the LWC framework itself, but it's just part of the LWC ecosystem, which is arguably just as important, is now we have access to the playground. So the playground is included in the component docs, and it's just a little tab up at the top. And so what's really nice is, let me skip to the next slide here. What's really nice is that on the left here you can see you have the project files. So you can add modules into there, you can add HTML, CSS files. You do all your editing in the middle, and then you see everything rendered here on the right side. When you're ready, when you feel confident that you've reproduced your issue, you click the Save button up in the top right there. When you click the Save button, it's going to create a link like in the previous slide right here. And you can see that link says /1/edit. That says /1 because this is version controlled. So when I take that link then and I post it on Stack Exchange, somebody else can click on that link and they'll be taken directly to a playground link which has the exact same code that I had with all of the files and everything. When they've made any of their changes, then they click Save again, and they get another link that says /2/edit. They paste it back in Stack Exchange, and they can show me exactly how they've updated the code, and I can actually click on the link and see it working. All right, and that is my talk. I hope that this inspired some of you, if you've been kind of on the fence, to try Lightning Web Components. For us, it's been extremely beneficial just in terms of the productivity gains. Here are some of the other sessions that are going on during the conference tomorrow, which are related to Lightning Web Components if you're interested. And that does it for me. Yeah. Thank you. I think I have time for maybe a question or two if anyone has any. Yes, you were first. Yes. So the question was, one of the things, and like I said, I've run into this too, just like everyone has. So with Aura, the Aura IDs have to be unique. And when I was showing the example of using a data attribute, like data-ID in that case, it's just standard HTML. So that can be unique, it can not be unique, it can be whatever the heck you want it to be. Yeah, just like in the HTML. Good question.
What are the version playground links valid for?
Okay, so the question was how long are the playground version links valid for? I don't know that they ever expire. I've never seen anything about them having an expiration date. So presumably forever, but don't quote me on that. Yeah. Yeah. Can you come closer? Got it. Yeah, good question. So the question was, is there a way to tie the playground links back to an individual user so you can see all of the links that you've created? No, there is not a way to do that today. That is a interesting suggestion. Yeah, I can suggest that. Yeah. All right, and that's it for questions. Thank you, everyone.